Welcome to another Q&A. We haven't done one of these in a really long time.
But luckily, Jen G came through and emailed us a ton of great questions. As long as you want the series to keep on going, keep emailing us the questions. So let's get started.
Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and check out our other YouTube channel for new videos coming out every day. Go to 2inazoo.com and hit subscribe while you're there. Here we go.
Let me preface this by saying I have a sore throat this morning, so Mike's going to do the majority of talking, and I'll interject.
So let's get down to question one. Why is your channel named Two in a Zoo? We get that question all the time, and I don't think we've ever answered it in a Q&A. It's really simple. Melanie and I are the two, and our family collectively is the Zoo. We named our channel that in 2014, so it's been almost 4 years since we named our channel Two in a Zoo, and I think we felt more like a zoo back when we started because we had two little boys and they were messy and rowdy and life felt like a zoo. But as the kids get older, they're getting a little more organized. Not to say sometimes it's still not pretty hectic. That's why we named it Two in a Zoo. And then we named our other channel Behind the Zoo because it's kind of a behind the scenes. This channel is like a behind the scenes, more in-depth content that you would not get over on our daily vlogging channel. So if you're not subscribed, please subscribe to both.
Question number 2. Do we have any information about Cadence's past? Not really.
Very, very, very little. And we've asked her tons of questions, and her answers are inconsistent, and it's kind of obvious that she's blurring together her own experience with the stories she's heard from the other kids. And those are things you just deal with an adopted child. They because they have had trauma, they piece together things in their mind the way it makes sense, and the way it makes sense is not always reality. And in addition to that, even if we did know stuff, we probably wouldn't share it on our YouTube channel because that's really private to her life. So we have to kind of walk that line thinking about what would future 25-year-old Cadence want us to do? What would she want us to keep private? What would she want us to say? We're trying to honor what our daughter would want, or at least what we think her older self would want. And that's one of the things that we want to be very careful about sharing, even if we did know information. Number 3, I imagine the adoption process could challenge a marriage. How did you overcome disagreements and difficulties during the adoption process? Absolutely, it challenges a marriage. We talked with a social worker yesterday for our 6-month update, follow-up, because you have to do, when you bring a child home, you have to do 3, 6, 9, 12, 18, and 24-month follow-up appointments with a social worker. So we had the 6-month one yesterday. And we were talking with a social worker, and in our conversations, which were very just fluid and natural, we talked about how often parents walk into the process blind, and even Christian parents can, with the best intentions, when it comes to thinking about challenges to your marriage and things like that, we just have the idea that we're just going to pray the problem away and things will be fine. But there really are serious challenges to your marriage when you get to the point that, especially when that child comes home and you're dealing with things you may not have prepared for. There are disagreements, and you have to both be willing to humble yourselves and stop and say, it is not about my opinion winning. It is about figuring out together as a team what is best for the child. I mean, that could mean any myriad of things depending on the situation you're in.
One of the things that was probably the most challenging is because it took so long of a process to even get a referral and get even the ball moving. There were lots of times that, especially in the beginning, I think when we were denied, that I think we both wanted to give up and didn't see a light at the end of the tunnel, and didn't even know if this was a process that we were even supposed to complete.
Yeah.
Is this something that God's going to bring us to, teach us a lesson? Or
is it something that will never work out?
Right.
And through that, we will gain some sort of wisdom that God wanted us to have all along. We believe in God's sovereignty, that no matter what happens, He did it for a reason.
Right.
He allowed it to happen for a reason that is ultimately, as His children, for our good, right? Mm-hmm. And we're not the only parents who go through this. Tons of parents go through this because the delays that happen with an adoption, they're unending. Every time you think you're almost to a milestone, something happens and you take 1 step forward and then 3 steps back, 10 steps back sometimes. And it is so discouraging. It is so disheartening. And I think in our marriage, it challenged us because at times one of us was like, no, we can't stop. And the other was like, maybe God's telling us to stop. And those are things where you have to work, you have to talk through it. That's one good area where Melanie and I probably do well in our marriage is we don't let things lie very easily. Neither of us is able to see a problem in our marriage and just let it exist without talking about it. We have to talk about it. Even if the timing's not right, we still talk about it anyway. And we know that, okay, even if right now the situation is emotionally charged, we know that we're still better off to talk about it then than to be people who would just sweep it under the rug and pretend it doesn't exist. So we worked through those things when they happened. We obviously never made rash decisions. We know that any situation requires time to process, time to pray, time to seek counsel from other people who have been through what you're going through. And we have counseled other people. We have had people come to us having seen us on this channel and been in the exact situation we're talking about where there's delays in the process and they don't know what to do. And we know families who have stopped the adoption process and families who have continued on. So I think in your marriage, you have to take it one battle at a time. The things that come your way, you have to just take them as they come and realize that pursuing the adoption process, pursuing adopting a child, is all going to be for nothing if your marriage suffers to the point that if that child were to come home, you have no marriage left because you let it tear you apart. What good is that going to do for the child that you're bringing home? So you really have to keep your priorities set. And we have our personally, our priorities are God, each other, and then our children. And it has to be that way because if your children are higher, your marriage is going to suffer in a way that eventually makes the children suffer. Whereas if your marriage is second only to God, you're gonna keep God first. Your spirituality will be where it needs to be. Your marriage, which is the most important and long-lasting relationship that you will have on this earth, other than your relationship with the Lord, your marriage needs to be second because how good your marriage is will impact how good every other relationship in your life is able to be, including the relationship with your children. I've heard many pastors say, the best thing you can do for your children is love your spouse as much as possible and as selflessly as possible because children find security in seeing mommy and daddy love each other. So through the adoption process, that's important that we do that for our kids who are going through the process with us, and for that little girl or boy who's going to come home into your family, and for that little girl who came home into our family. Okay, question 4. How and when did you determine you were the right person for each other? Presumably back in our dating days. And that's a great question. We've actually been telling that whole story, and it's like a 10-part story at least. We have, I think, 6 of the videos up so far. The series is called Just the Two, and you can find it on this channel, Behind the Zoo. You can really get an in-depth answer. I'll simply say sometime in the summer of 2005, we both came to the realization that we were the right person for each other. Probably around August is when I started shopping for rings or thinking about shopping for rings. Probably around July or August is when she started to see me as marriage material. But to know what I mean by that, to know the context, you need to watch that series, Just the Two. So please, there's a playlist for it. Go watch it.
It's also when I decided to not go back.
Yeah, she decided to not go back to school, so it's a whole story. You got to go check it out. And lastly, this is a great question. Question 5. How would you handle a situation like the couple in the movie Lion? And if you haven't seen Lion, you must see the movie Lion. It is incredible. Whose second adopted child, Mantosh, had trouble adjusting to his new home and he suffered from rage and self-harm. Were you prepared to deal with a child displaying those behaviors? So, do you want to answer this or do you want me to?
Short answer, we had tools to do that. I don't think you're fully prepared unless you're in it. So that's the short answer. That's for me. Yes, we had tools. We knew that could possibly be a scenario that we would have to deal with.
Our social workers and our training prepared us
for everything.
For everything. For sexual issues, if a child had been sexualized, for rage, for self-harm, which self-harm and rage sometimes go hand in hand.
Yeah. Or if they were going to harm our boys.
Yeah, if they were going to try and harm our children, harm us. Food issues like food attachment issues, hoarding of food, stealing things from you, and like a pack rat, hiding things away in their room under their bed, and
Sensory issues.
sensory issues where they couldn't be in public, couldn't be around other people.
Yeah.
Oh, tons of things. Yes, tons of things that the training that we were put through and that we think everybody should go through warns you about, and then gives you some tools, things to turn to. How would we have handled a child like that? I think love can overcome a lot of things. So loving that child, it has to be the goal. It can't be correcting that child's behavior. Whenever you do anything in this life that is just about correcting a behavior, you're probably not going to do much that's going to last, because you're not getting to the root of it. I mean, whether it's with my weight loss, I try and correct a behavior where I don't snack, that's not going to do anything. I have to get to the root of why it is I have a gluttonous attitude that makes me want to snack and snack and snack. You got to get to the root of anything. So you're not going to get to the root of something without special care, like maybe counseling, family counseling, if it gets that far.
Oh gosh.
You're not going to get to the root of anything without special tools in a situation like that. Reading that, I know that counseling would probably be somewhere in the mix of the solution you would try to apply to this. Self-harm, in those types of situations, that child may need to sleep in your room, very near to you, be under your watchful eye at all times. You would need to do things like keep a child safety lock on any place where you store knives, in the kitchen, I mean. All things like scissors would need to be removed from the environment and kept under lock and key. You'd have to pay special attention to things like that.
Well, Mike said everything like that. That's probably where we would start. And then for us, we would just shower in prayer and just ask the Lord to
supernaturally
because he can get to the root of anything. So, and
he can give you the vision, the wisdom to see things you can't.
Right.
We pray for that all the time, that we are finite people, Lord. We need you. We rely upon you to show us what we can't see and give us the wisdom we currently don't have to know how to respond to this situation. We ask for God for that wisdom with our children all the time, and he comes through because we pray, and then we talk and we listen to our kids, and that wisdom always comes. And things are that way when you humble yourself before God. I do know this, in a situation like Mantosh, when that happens these days, because that happened for Mantosh in the movie, that happened in like the 90s or the early 90s, I think, or late 80s. I can't remember the exact timeline of Saru's story. It's escaping me now. But I do know that today, at least right now, if that had happened to us or happens to a family, there is a network of support out there for people who are going through the same situation. And it is not hard to find others who have walked where you have walked. At our disposal, there were numerous social workers we had worked with, names, numbers, email addresses we knew that we could have contacted someone immediately and asked for help and direction. There's counseling everywhere. We have more access to information through the internet, through books these days than any other generation ever. Situations like this are scary, and I firmly believe that 20, 30, 40 years ago, things like that would have been scarier than they are now, because even though they would be tough, they would be a challenge to any marriage, to any family unit, they can be overcome, and there's just more at our fingertips, at our disposal, more tools and information at our disposal than ever before, and that makes things like this not seem quite as big. Yes, they are tough for families. I'm not going to downplay that at all, but they can be overcome, and I hope they would never be a deterrent to someone trying to adopt, because that child, Mantosh, needed love. He needed a family. He needed security. He needed self-identity, self-love, a ton of things that children who are not connected children need. So that's probably not quite the answer you may have wanted, but those are all the things that are on our mind at the moment. as we read your question, Jen. So that's our last question for today. We love sitting here and getting to interact with our viewers by answering questions like these. We love this series and we want to keep doing it. We'd rather not make up questions that we think you want to know. We'd rather answer
Right.
real questions. So please keep emailing us questions, and if you could, put Q&A or questions in the subject line so we can find them really easy in our inbox, because we get a lot of emails. So that's it for today's video. You know what to do. Like, comment, subscribe, share, and all that stuff, and we will see you next time on Behind the Zoo.